Hi, welcome. I'm Becky Mayer, and I am the host of Transitions, Mind, Body, Spirit. You know, we're all in a transition in life, and this program is to feature wonderful people who can explain to us how they did different transitions, whether it's a triathlon, which you bike, swim, run, whether it's yoga, and we have a wonderful icon of yoga in Nashville, Tennessee, here tonight. We have Jan Campbell. Thank you, Jan, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Becky. This is wonderful. I appreciate this opportunity.
I want to tell people a little bit about what Jan has currently, and she's going to tell us how she transitioned from many different lives. And basically, she owns the Yoga Center, which is here in Berry Hill in Nashville, Tennessee. And she is a certified Iyengar instructor at the junior intermediate 3 level. And she's the only one at that level in Nashville. She currently teaches between 60 and 75 students a week. And she teaches a particular form of Iyengar yoga, which she's going to explain. And we won't just be talking in today's program. We'll be also, she'll be demonstrating what yoga is all about. But particularly, Jan, I wanted you to kind of tell everybody the beginning of your life story, where you grew up, and if sports or anything like yoga was even on your radar in high school, and kind of give us play by play. You grew up here, and you became a mom, and then and just tell us about that.
All right, I'll do that. I actually grew up in Mississippi. I was born in a little town not far from Mobile, Alabama. My father was principal of the school there, and my mom taught English. And I stayed in Mississippi my whole high school life, and I actually went to college in Mississippi. And I had never even heard of yoga. I didn't even know there was any such thing. And the closest thing I came to as far as sports are concerned is just being a cheerleader. So I did a lot of jumping up and down, but other than that, not much activity, except for being a tomboy. I married actually after my first year in college, and was married for 39 years. Wow. And had 3 children to a Methodist minister. So I was the preacher's wife in Mississippi. After 39 years, the marriage began to, and I didn't work when the children were small, which I'm grateful for. I was a stay-at-home mom, and that worked well. And then when they got a little bit older, we moved to Nashville. Actually, my 3rd child was born in Nashville at Vanderbilt. And when she got to be in elementary school, I took a job at Vanderbilt in the radiology department as a medical secretary. And I was there from 1970 to 1976, still had never even heard the word yoga. Then in 76, I left Vanderbilt, studied, and got my real estate license. So I worked in residential real estate for 10 years. And it was during this time that I first heard about yoga and became fascinated with it, and began my own home practice, and would occasionally take a class with people here in town locally. There weren't that many people teaching at that time. So after 10 years in real estate, I was getting a bit burned out. I'm sure you can understand how that happens sometime. And decided I really needed a change, and what I'd really like to do is to teach yoga. And there were no yoga studios at that time in Nashville.
None in Nashville.
None.
None.
People were teaching classes in church basements and just wherever they could rent a space, but no one had a studio. So I went out to California, to San Francisco, and did a month of study there at the Iyengar Institute in San Francisco, which is not a lot. I still didn't know very much, but I came back to Nashville and decided to open a studio in the back of my home. And my husband had a small business in Berry Hill, and we owned a house there. And it became very easy to just convert his large conference room into a yoga studio. So in November of 1986, I opened the first yoga studio in Nashville.
Wow.
And I'm still doing that. So lots of changes in my life. Actually, I think what got me interested in yoga in the first place is that my marriage was in trouble, and I began to do a lot of searching for just to find out who I am apart from being a mother and a wife. And yoga seemed to be a part of that transition for me. It helped me to know, number one, more about who I am as a person, and number two, it became my passion. I loved it, and I really wanted to share it with other people because the benefits for me were so amazing. So that's sort of the way I got started. So in November of '86, I started offering classes, and it has grown and I've never really advertised at all. It's been a word of mouth kind of situation, but that has worked well. And I'm still teaching full time. I was born in 1933, which makes me 79 at this point. And I think when I opened the studio, I was in my 50s, early 50s. So it's something that I didn't really know about until a little later in my life than most people these days, because it's become so mainstream now that it's easy to find. And yoga is, as you know, everywhere. But it was not that way, particularly in the South in the early 80s and 70s. I think there was a lot of fear in the South that it was somehow a religious cult, and because of that should be avoided if you're a Christian. And I'd like to say that it's really not a cult. Yoga is a philosophy. There is a philosophy behind it. And in the U.S. and in the Western world, it's mostly used as a way to get some exercise, to relieve stress, and to increase one's strength, endurance, and flexibility. So it's not scary like it was back in the 70s, and now people come to my classes that I think would not have come 20-something years ago because of the fear that it might be something that their local pastor would not approve of. I think that's not the case anymore.
Now, do you feel that in the West people have a different way of yoga than, let's say, in India, or is there a different flavor?
There are lots of different types of yoga. So, and certainly in India there are many, many different types of yoga. I do go to India to study for a month at the time. I've been actually on 4 different occasions to study.
Can you tell us about staying in India and what that is? And I think we have a picture of Mr. Iyengar.
I do have a picture of Mr. Iyengar and also of his daughter Geeta. There is an institute in Pune which is a university town in India. It's about 100 miles from what used to be called Bombay is now called Mumbai. So generally I would fly into Mumbai and either take a local flight or a taxi from Mumbai to Pune. And the institute there, the classes are very much like, they're very westernized because Mr. Iyengar has been to the U.S. He started coming to the U.S. at the invitation of yoga teachers here in the 60s. And so he's familiar with our culture. So when you go to India and take classes there, they're not a lot different from what you would see in the U.S. There are local people that come to classes. There are people from all over the globe that come. You'll see people there from Europe that speak 5 or 6 different languages from English, but the classes are taught in English. So if you have an understanding of English, no matter if it's not your first language, you'll be okay in those classes in India. Does that answer your question, Becky?
Yes. Well, back to your transition when you first went, well, it sounded like that there was a time when you barely knew about yoga and somehow or other you became, well, I want to not only do yoga, but I want to teach it. In fact, I'll open my own studio. What gave you what empowered you to just do it? Because nobody else had done that. What was that?
Well, when I first started teaching, it was not my idea. One of my friends said, why don't you start teaching a class? And I said, because I don't know enough to teach. She said, well, you know more than the rest of us know. And I went, oh, well, that's probably true. So I sort of started that way. And the second thing that probably was the main thing that really pushed me into this was that I was pretty miserable as a realtor at that point. I had done it for 10 years, and I thought, you know, I'd rather starve than do this anymore. So, that's really what motivated me to just make a change.
You were unhappy in the one situation, and
right.
I got to get out of this, and what do I really like? Oh, I really like yoga.
And then
I have a passion for it.
Yes, and I realized that this really is my passion.
Wow.
And I didn't know whether I could make a living at it or not. I seriously didn't know whether it was possible. But I decided that I had to give it a try. And I have never regretted making that choice.
And when you opened your studio, how old were you again?
Oh my, I'll have to do the math.
Approximately.
Yeah, well, from 33 to 86, that's 53, right?
Okay.
I was 53.
You're 53, and here you are 53 years old and going, I'm going to change my life totally.
Right.
I'm going to do something nobody else has done in Nashville, and I'm just going to take a leap of faith and just do it.
Right, and the other thing is I felt pretty sure my marriage was not going to last, and that was another scary thing. I had 3 children who were older at that point, so that was not as much of a financial concern, but it was still quite a big leap of faith to do that. And it has worked out. It's worked out. So.
And it sounds like, too, that now that yoga is so much more mainstream, like we were talking, you can go to Target and get your yoga mat. Weren't you saying that when you started, you couldn't even buy a mat around town?
There were no mats made in the United States when I first started practicing and teaching. And the only place that I knew to get a yoga mat, actually, they were made in Germany. I bought my first yoga mat from a yoga teacher's father who lived in Canada, and he imported the mats from Germany and sold them out of Canada. Mm-hmm. So I think this was true of most people that used a mat back in the 70s. Those people got their mats probably from this one source. Mm-hmm. And as yoga became more mainstream and people in the U.S. jumped on the bandwagon, and now, of course, you can buy yoga props of all kinds, many different places. You can get them at Target, you can get them at TJ Maxx, you can get them at bookstores sometime, just lots of different places.
Do you feel there's a particular reason why there's this wave of acceptance of yoga? It's on Channel 8. The YMCA has yoga, and when you started, it was this almost maybe it's a religion kind of mystic, we don't know. Why has it become so popular now, and you were in it before it was?
Well, I think when I came into it, it was popular on the West Coast and on the East Coast. In New York, in California, there was a lot of yoga. It just had not reached the South. And I honestly think that the influx of people into Nashville, maybe through the music industry and some other industries that brought people in, helped to establish the mainstream effect of yoga. So these people sort of got us out of our little provincial place that we had been in. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story about the Y. I went to the Y in Green Hills right after I got back from San Francisco and had opened my studio, and thought perhaps they might like to have a yoga class at the Y. And they said, oh, no, we don't teach yoga. We're a Christian organization.
Oh, wow.
So that's how far we've come. So now there's probably not a Y in Nashville that doesn't have yoga classes.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
It was a different world.
Yes.
In those days. Very different.
You were in your 50s when you started your own place, and when you first started yoga, am I correct, you were in your 40s?
Yes, I was, I think, 48 when I first took my first class.
You took your first class. And the people that I talk to that think, oh, well, I'm 40, I can't do yoga, because they have this idea you have to twist yourself like a pretzel or something. That's not true.
No, it's not true, and I think it should not be, it shouldn't be that way. I think people like me who just came in off the street, and I really had not done anything physical with my body at that time except take care of 3 children.
Wow.
And
no big training?
No training of any kind, no walking, no running. So even though I had a degree of natural flexibility, I had no strength. So I had to build up some muscles and some endurance to balance my flexibility, because if I hadn't, too much flexibility without strength can be dangerous. I think you're more likely or just as likely to injure yourself if you're overly flexible without the strength to support that as you are if you're quite muscle bound and inflexible. So they both have their problems because there's an imbalance in the body. And what yoga does so beautifully, and I've always told people that are athletes, don't stop doing what you're doing. Keep doing it, whether it's whatever it is. But just add some yoga and supplement what you're doing so that you begin to build long, lean muscles. And you still have your strength and your endurance, but now you can balance it with some flexibility. So many back problems, I think, are caused from people's tight hamstrings. And I've been told by physicians that if your hamstrings are extremely tight, they can actually pull on the back muscles and create discomfort. So there are a lot of things that can happen when our bodies are not balanced.
I know that NFL football players are doing yoga.
Yes.
Eddie George is a yoga person.
Definitely.
I personally do triathlons, and all the coaches I've ever talked to, they all say, do your endurance stuff and do yoga. Because it's just so important. And I was doing that two days ago, just to help stretch out those muscles.
Right.
Yes. So one thing too that we wanted to focus on is the fact that we wanted you to demonstrate various poses and also give an idea of to the people out there that don't know anything about yoga, what are some basic things, and how the Iyengar yoga is, if you could explain how that is so good if you're a beginner, so you're going to learn right, because a lot of people sometimes will say, well, I tried it and I hurt myself and I never did it again, and it kind of defeats the whole purpose. But I think it's so important in the style that you do it step by step, and people can learn it the right way, one-on-one with somebody like you correcting them and saying you need to change this and change that. Can you kind of tell us about what Iyengar is, and a little touch on the other ones? It's almost like different religions or something. And people don't quite understand.
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that question. BKS Iyengar, I think, is the first yoga teacher who introduced what we call props in yoga. You see
like,
and yoga mats. This is a block, and this is a strap. And let's say you're a very stiff person, and in a yoga class you are asked to bend forward and take your hands to the floor. Well, if your hamstrings are really tight, you might need the floor built up a bit for you. So we would provide you with not one block, but two, one for each hand. And these can be used at different levels. So if you only needed at this level, you'd be here or here. So this, I think, is so important for beginners to have a little extra help in certain poses where they need it, so that they don't feel that they're less than because they can't touch their toes or touch the floor from standing with straight legs. So when we start in our classes, when we start people out, we start people very gently so that hopefully there aren't injuries.
So they're not intimidated. They can begin and feel comfortable, and hey, I can do this. I can't reach the floor all the way, but I can use the block, and I'm okay, and I'm not shamed because, oh, I can't do what everybody else can do.
Exactly. And in those classes, there will be other people of the same level. So we don't have people in those classes that have been doing yoga for years. We move them up to different classes. And so there are different levels depending, excuse me, on where the person is. So we have some older people in our classes as well as young people. And we want to be careful that nobody injures themselves. So we usually start out with beginners by working on their foundation, which is mostly, you know, the feet and the legs and how to stand correctly. And we see a lot of people on the street, and you've seen it too, who life is either beating them down or they've been at their computers for too many hours, and the chest begins to collapse and the shoulders begin to come forward.
Right, I see a lot of that.
You see a lot of that. So we have a lot of different ways of working with doing what we call chest openings, so that the posture improves and people almost invariably will feel better just with that much happening. And then from there, when we work with them with standing poses, and I'll talk about that or show you what that is later, we work with it with alignment so that the body is aligned correctly. And then there are also some classes that are designed for stress, and they're called restorative
yoga. Okay.
And so there's that element of yoga. So there are a lot of different choices that one can make within their yoga practice as to where they need to fit. So most people need to start from the beginning and work their way up to the various levels.
Is there any timeline, like somebody they get off the couch and they try yoga, they've never done it, and in 6 months they're here, or 1 year they're here, or does it even matter?
You know, it doesn't matter. It's not a competitive thing, and we try to stress that. And people differ in many ways. They differ, number one, genetically.
Right.
Number two, they differ in how much they're willing to, how often they're willing to practice. Are you willing to have a home practice and do a little bit every day? If you are, you will progress faster than someone who only comes to a class once a week. So it's almost impossible to say how quickly you might progress. It depends on how much you really want to do this, and how much you love it, how much time you can give to it. Not that it takes a lot of time. I tell people if they can start with 10 minutes a day.
10
just
minutes,
get
that's
on,
all?
Yes, get
10
on that
minutes.
mat for 10 minutes. It will make a huge difference in their lives. And
That's
what
amazing.
happens, Becky, is that when people get on their mat for 10 minutes, they generally don't want to get off the mat.
It's just
So
if
they'll
once they
be
start,
there
then
for maybe 15 minutes. But if you only have 10 minutes out of your schedule, and that's all you can spare, 10 minutes is a lot better than nothing. It really is.
Well, when we get to the part of the program, I want to see your the poses, and it fascinates me because I do yoga, but I do it with a class so much better than at home.
Exactly.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, I have my mat and everything. If I just get the mat out and start, then you'll do it.
Exactly.
Right.
It's sort of like when we used to have to iron. You know, for me, it was just getting out the ironing board. Once the ironing board was out, I didn't really mind the ironing, but getting the ironing board, getting the iron. So it's sort of that way with the mat. You just roll out your mat, and then the rest of it comes easily.
Do you find that, I mean, there's so many videos out, do you think that's a good thing to, okay, I'm going to put the video on and I'm going to go ahead and do my yoga, or is that a bad thing? What do you feel?
I wouldn't say it's good or bad. I'm probably not the best person to ask about that because I don't enjoy working with videos. I like my practice to be different every day, and videos are, you know, you have one thing, one set of things, but some people, that appeals to a lot of people. So I think it can be an okay thing to do. The one thing about it that's not good is that you don't have anyone there to look at what you're doing and correct you if you're doing something that might injure you. So
Very good. All right. Well, on this portion, we are going to take a little break, and we're going to see some amazing things. Instead of just talking about it, we're going to see some wonderful poses. And thank you, and we'll go to the next part of our program.
thank you, Becky.
All right. Well, Jan, I have had such a thrilling time with you. It's been so wonderful to have you explain yoga here for our wonderful audience out there. Thank you so much.
You are more than welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
And remember, that's Jan Campbell at the Yoga Room in Berry Hill
It's
in
a
Nashville.
yoga center.
Woo! It is the Yoga Center, the Yoga Center in Berry Hill, Jan Campbell. And I think that we've all learned a lot, and I'm ready to get my yoga mat out and start doing it. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
So we start with a sun salutation, and this is the first of the forward bends that you will see. And this pose is called downward facing dog pose. Now come forward into a lunge, and then back into downward facing dog, and then lunge on the other side. Back into downward dog. And now little back bending pose, upward facing dog. Back to downward facing dog. And stepping the feet forward into another forward bending pose, and then back up. And that is just an example of one way of doing a sun salutation. There are many variations on that. And now we will do a series of standing poses put together in a bit of a flow. This first one is called the triangle pose. It has a Sanskrit name, as do all of these. Utthita Trikonasana is the Sanskrit name. Transitioning to Virabhadrasana 2, this is a warrior pose. And this one with the hand down is a lateral side angle pose, Utthita Parshvakonasana. And this is our first balance pose. It's a leg balance using one leg, one arm. It's a half moon pose called Ardha Chandrasana. From here, there's another hero pose, Virabhadrasana 1. And then as I straighten the leg, I come into Parshvottanasana, which is an intense stretch forward. This pose is wide legs, so legs are wide apart, and it's called Prasarita Padottanasana, widespread hands and legs and feet pose. And then we will do the same series on the second side so that it's a balanced practice. First, triangle pose, Utthita Trikonasana. Virabhadrasana 2, hero pose, or warrior pose, I'm sorry. And Utthita Parshvakonasana, lateral angle pose. Another half moon pose, Ardha Chandrasana. Ardha means half, Chandra is moon. Back into Warrior 1. And straightening the leg into Parshvottanasana. Into Prasarita Padottanasana. And coming back to standing. Now this is our first seated back bend pose. It's a pose called the camel's pose, Ustrasana. And then one more back bending pose just to get an idea of the different areas of the body that are involved in the different poses. So this is a stretch of the front of the body, and it's sometimes called the wheel. It is, the Sanskrit is Urdhva Dhanurasana, so it's upward facing bow pose. Now we have a seated twist with the legs in lotus position called Padmasana. And I'm simply going to twist first to the right. And now to the left. Twistings are very good for the spine. They help the circulation around the spinal muscles. And this one is with one leg in lotus and coming forward over the extended leg into another, what we call a forward bend. So if you look at the shape of this, you can see it is an extension of the back body, whereas the back bending poses were extensions of the front body. So we'll do this on each side to stay balanced. Now the next pose is called Upavishta Konasana. It's a wide angle pose, and you can either stay upright or you can come forward in this to get a little more extension in the inner thighs and in the hamstrings. And this pose is called the cobbler's pose. Another name for it is the bound angle pose, or Baddha Konasana. Kona means angle, Baddha means bound. So the poses in Sanskrit all have English translations, and sometimes they're referred to by their English name, sometimes by their Sanskrit name. So this pose is an example of a few of the inversions that we like to do to balance out our practice. So it gives you some upper arm strength, upper body strength, and also helps with the circulation, since you are reversing the effect of gravity when you're upside down. It's very, it's a good pose to wake you up and make you feel a little more alive. It also, these poses help with depression. If you are suffering from depression, going up into a handstand will help alleviate that. Yeah. So this next position is a pose called a forearm balance. So you're balancing on your elbows, your wrist, and your hands. The head is off the floor, and these poses can be done away from the wall so that you're balancing. And in this one, I do move the feet from the wall, and I am balancing, well, for a little while. So these are just two examples of some of the inversions that we do to round out our practice. So there are standing poses, seated poses, twist, back bends, forward bendings, and then some inversions. This is probably the one. Did we do two? Okay, so here we go, forearm balance. And then you can do this in the center of the room if you have your balance, and many yoga students are very comfortable doing this in the center of the room, so the feet don't touch the wall in this one. Or you can do it at the wall touching.